My people, I'm coming to you from one of my favorite places to work this time of year, the balcony above the cafe, and I'm rocking the quarantine uniform, sweatpants and hoodie, and I'm hoping it's quiet enough up here, long enough for me to do this, so let's give it a shot. So with today being Palm Sunday, I wanted to pull from a story from the final week of Jesus' life that relates to our present situation. So one of the ways the final week of Jesus' life may feel similar to ours is the felt sense of scarcity. Right now, there are many reasons life might feel scarce to us, as we either experience real loss or the potential of loss in the face of the coronavirus. Maybe we fear the loss of our own health or the health of our loved ones. Maybe we're experiencing financial stress, or maybe the fear of potential financial stress as the virus impacts the economy. Or maybe just having an uncertain future can spark those fears and that sense of scarcity. Or maybe we feel a sense of relational and emotional scarcity as we experience increasing distance from other people. I mean, I'm on day 23 of sweatpants and gym shorts, so I know it's been a while since I've been around people beside my family. So that time away from people can leave us feeling lonely. A big threat from this virus, before it even touches us personally, is then this sense of physical scarcity, financial scarcity, and emotional scarcity. So how are we tempted to respond to that? We're often tempted to make the subtle and often subconscious step in our minds from that circumstance that we are alone, that God is somewhat distant or detached. And once we're there, it doesn't take long for that sense of being alone to manifest in self-centered thoughts and actions. The logic is, in this time of scarcity, I need to take care of myself. I need to look out for number one. And maybe that comes out in hoarding tendencies and self-indulgent behavior, or maybe just thoughts totally consumed with the self, whether we have enough. Maybe irritability toward the few folks that we've been around. And behind all of those behaviors, though, is this lingering thought that we are alone, that we are not safe. When we are insecure with God and our future feels up in the air, it's almost automatic for us to think and live selfishly. So we're going to read, though, a story from the end of Jesus' life in John 13. And in this story, Jesus also experiences real scarcity in the exact same areas of life that we may feel now. His physical life was threatened. His friends were wavering in their commitment to him, leaving him feeling lonely and abandoned. And the religious leaders and crowds were rejecting him, leaving him feeling unsafe. In the chapter that precedes this one, he takes stock of his circumstances and cries out, "My soul is troubled." Like us, he's in a time when he's tempted to live into that scarcity. And like us, he could turn to look out for number one, his thoughts and his actions. But in the story we're reading today, he takes the exact opposite turn. He makes an extravagantly generous and sacrificial move to serve those around him. And this passage tells us why. Because he is relationally secure with the Father and feels confident in his eternal future with him. So, when we are insecure with God and our future feels uncertain, it's almost automatic for us to think and live selfishly. But when we are relationally confident with God and our future is secure eternally with him, we are free to live selflessly even when circumstances can feel scarce. So let's see how this plays out in John 13. Verse 1. Now before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he had come from God and was going back to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. So I want you to note here in the setup of the story two things. Both Jesus' circumstances that could tempt him towards scarcity and his confident relationship and future with the Father. It says Jesus knows his hour to depart the world is coming. In all four Gospels, Jesus fully intends to end his ministry by dying on a cross in Jerusalem. That was his intention. And yet, as that reality approaches, his heart is indeed troubled because he's human just like us. The fact he was God does not take away from the real pain he experienced. His soul was troubled by his looming death. And also here, Jesus knows that one of his own disciples, Judas, was going to betray him. One of his own. A friend who had been with him throughout his whole ministry had made a decision to look straight at all Jesus had to offer him and reject it. I can't imagine how that would make Jesus feel. Having been in ministry for over 11 years now, the most painful thing in ministry has been when a person that I devoted huge amounts of time, energy, and love to chooses to walk away from God, from the church, or even from me personally. And when that has happened, it's taken a while to grieve through it. So one of the things that's given me assurance in that is that Jesus, the best pastor, best teacher, best minister, best counselor who had ever lived, has himself experienced that rejection. Imagine the temptation his mind could move towards. He could say, no one understands me. No one's listening to me. No one likes me. This ministry isn't working. It's not worth it. The Father's not with me. He could complain. He could blame the Father. He could bail on the plan. And he can turn to look out for himself in that time of scarcity. But what keeps him from making that selfish turn is his confidence in where he stands with the Father. It says that he knew not only that it was time to die, but also, both these things in tension, that it was time to go to the Father. He says he knew that the Father had given all things into his hands. He knew where he had came from God. He knew where he was going, back to God. So he knew his relationship with the Father was so secure that it could transcend and bypass all his painful present circumstances and ensure his eternal future. Even death itself would only have a temporary hold. Nothing that felt scarce would be permanent. Because of his confidence in where he stands with the Father and what it will mean for him for eternity, he's free to not have to think of himself and his needs, but instead to give himself away. Check it out, verse 4. He got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel that was tied around him. So Jesus here stoops to the lowest level possible to wash his disciples' feet. He violates all the social distancing standards of our day, touching somebody's foot and social norms of his. Just imagine what you already feel towards other people's feet. And these dudes, though, far beyond that, would be accustomed to walking long distances and not the best sandals on dusty roads. The condition of the feet on these 12 dudes would have been absurd. I'm talking crusty, calloused, dusty, unclipped toenails, stanky type feet. And it doesn't take our modern intellectual capacity to understand the nastiness here. That's why in the first century, washing others' feet was a position looked down upon by all, both Jews and Gentiles, and it would be reserved for only non-Jewish slaves to do for their masters or as an act of hospitality for their master's guest. It would have been an utter shock for the disciples for Jesus to gird himself like a servant with the towel around himself, stoop down to the ground, and wash their feet, all 12 of them. And Peter emphatically communicates his astonishment on behalf of the 12. Verse 6, he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered, you do not know now what I am doing, but later you'll understand. Peter said to him, you will never wash my feet. And Jesus answered, unless I wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, one who is bathed does not need to wash, except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, not all of you are clean. So I relate to our man Peter here, a man of extremes, a man who knows no moderation. First, he's emphatic in his ignorance and his rejection. You will never wash my feet. Jesus, fine, I won't. And then you'll have no part or no share with me. Peter then, emphatic in his turnaround. Fine then, give me an entire bath, wash everything on me. Jesus, nah, brother, only your feet are necessary since you've been made clean already. But he's noting here the symbolic connection between the cleansing from sin that he truly, freely gives to everyone and the washing of the feet that he does here. And in that way, we share in the disciples' receiving of this shocking act of service from Jesus. Jesus has served us all of humanity, in the same way he serves the disciples here, by giving us that once for all fundamental cleansing of our sin that this foot washing represents. Because of that, we too can experience the relational and eternal security that Jesus experiences with the Father. It's because of the assurance of that permanently cleansed and forgiven heart that we can feel safe and free in our relationship with God and our eternal future with him. This is that unshakable sense of peace that Jesus offers, that no matter what our temporary physical lives could endure, no matter what sufferings and losses we could experience, Jesus has purified our hearts and given us a permanently secure relationship with the Father. We now, like Peter, have a share in Jesus' life and inheritance. What has been given to him now includes us. No matter what we could now face in this world, we have that, and nothing could take that away. We are thus freed and empowered to follow Jesus' lead here, to give and serve even in the face of seemingly scarce circumstances, because he has served us and made us clean, and now we have everything we need. And that's exactly the turn Jesus makes. Check it out. Verse 12. After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that's what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set an example for you, that you also should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them." His logic here is natural. I'm greater than you. I'm the teacher, you're the student. I'm the Lord, and you're under my authority and my rule. If I, as your superior, subordinate myself to serve you, what does that mean for you? It means you do the same and follow my example. Do to others as I have done to you here. And here, washing others' feet is more metaphorical. It's an image he gives us to have a posture towards life, not of self-gain, self-protection, and self-indulgence, but towards serving others, being generous, giving our lives away, even when times feel uncertain, resources feel scarce, or the threat of loss looms. So what might it mean for us to embrace this posture this week out of confidence in who we are and what we have in God? What's so counterintuitive right now is that I was preaching this on a normal Sunday a few months ago, almost everything I'd suggest would be a violation of today's social distancing recommendations. But for now, one of the best ways we can serve the vulnerable among us and serve healthcare workers is to make the sacrifices necessary to stay home. This story, though, empowers us to be more content with our confinement because we can interpret it through Jesus' lens of serving other people. We are subordinating our desires to relieve boredom and entertain ourselves in order to instead serve the sick, the vulnerable, and healthcare workers. So I pray that we have the strength to keep on in this task out of a disposition of serving other people for as long as we need. That said, even with this confinement, there are still plenty of other opportunities to do it, to live this life from a place of serving others out of our confidence in our status with God, as opposed to just being self-indulgent and self-protective. So first thing, this may be obvious, but it's important, is we can pray specifically for other people. As I mentioned earlier, when we feel threatened by a sense of scarcity, one of the first things to go is our inner life. Our minds are filled with worry and anxiety, fear and the need for self-protection, and then we escape from all that with self-indulgent behaviors. And this isn't to make us feel any shame for that. Even Jesus admits his soul feels troubled in that time of scarcity. But we can allow those initial thoughts to simply alert us to the temptation that we are having towards a scarcity mindset. And then allow, at that point, the Spirit to gently turn that anxious thought towards intercessory prayer for other people and for the world. So let's begin with that prayer, and I trust that as we turn towards praying for other people, God will give our spirits a sense of peace. We can also serve people by writing encouraging letters, sending texts and emails, calling and Skyping and Zooming and FaceTiming others out of loving service to them. And maybe some of us spend so much time doing all that for work that it's the last thing you want to do. I'm feeling that too. But stretching ourselves to connect with others, not for our own need, but out of love for others and their need, is a way to adopt Jesus' posture here. We also have opportunities to be generous with our money, to serve people, wash people's feet with our money. Those of us who have enough money can be preparing our hearts to be financially generous towards those who are financially vulnerable at this time. Many of us whose employment hasn't been threatened are still about to receive these stimulus checks from the government. So what if Christians chose to give away some or all of that money towards those who have been most financially impacted by the spread of the virus? I pray that as we feel gratitude personally for God's provision for us, that we would let that turn into generosity towards others in need. Motorcycle ride here, man. Another way to embrace Jesus' posture here is to begin by serving those whom we live with. Our spouse, our kids, roommates, family. When we live into the thoughts and feelings of scarcity, it is often these people in close proximity, often those we love the most, that feel our pain. From a place of fear and worry, we lash out and act selfishly and irritably. And while most of the problems caused by this virus seem so big and out there for us to address, we really can impact the people we live with by treating them with patience and kindness, apologizing and forgiving quickly, taking on more chores and housework without being prompted or asked, and doing all of that with a sense of gratitude. Not because we want some credit or because they will owe us something, but because these people in our home give us an opportunity to imitate Jesus' self-sacrificial love in the most practical ways. Those are just a few quick suggestions, but I trust God has given you a brain, the Spirit to guide you to come up with other creative ways to live this out in your setting. But I want to close with a reminder of the foundation behind all of this. Jesus was able to sacrificially wash his disciples' feet on the way to the much more magnificent sacrifice on the cross because of his confident relationship with the Father and his eternally secure future with him. He didn't just will himself to suffer and give his life away for no reason. He knew his status with the Father, and he knew the vindication to come with his resurrection. But the gospel is not just that he had that for himself, but that his death and resurrection are able to miraculously invite us to share in all of that with him. We too have been made right with God. We too are now relationally secure with him. We too have eternal life with God and God's people assured. We too are now God's children. He delights in us and loves us. We too are safe and loved forever, even when our temporary lives feel lacking or under threat. May our hearts become saturated by the overwhelming love. May we never grow tired or bored or calloused towards that indescribable gift. And may the gift of God's Son, Jesus Christ, give us all that we need so that we may be empowered to love and give and serve to each other and the world as Christ has given to us. May Christ's name be praised as we live into the Spirit's guidance and the power of his resurrection and service to the world this week. Love y'all. Peace.